Nicole Dunn. I'm an assistant professor and extension specialist at the University of Georgia Department of Food Science and Technology.
Okay. How did you get into food science?
I got into food science kind of through my parents. So my dad was he was a lot of things. He was a helicopter pilot in the military, but he retired from that and became a high school chemistry teacher. So we were always doing science experiments at home. My mom was also a family consumer science teacher, so she did a lot of food safety trainings and got me into cooking and just the general like how to have a food safe kitchen. So between the two of them, I don't think I had much option besides going into food science and food safety in particular. As far as my academic background, I got my bachelor's degree in food science at the University of Tennessee. I then spent about a year in the food industry, actually worked for Bush's Baked Beans. So I was there for a year, and that's where I really realized that, okay, I got a useful degree, but I want to learn more about food science. So I actually went back to University of Tennessee and got my master's and then my PhD in food science again. My focus for both of those programs was food safety. Primarily in my PhD, that's where I started getting into my focus of fresh produce safety. I guess after that, I went to University of Florida for a little less than a year and did a postdoc with a produce safety food microbiologist and extension specialist. And so that's kind of where I got that interest in extension that I'd already kind of had from grad school. I kind of had that reiterated a little bit during my postdoc. And then, of course, I got the job at University of Georgia.
That's good. How did you come to work at the University of Georgia?
So that's kind of a funny story. I got my PhD a week or two later, moved to Florida. And on my very first day walking into my advisor's office at University of Florida, I'd never met the woman in person. And I walked in and she was like, "Oh, welcome. Did you know University of Georgia has a position you may be interested in open?" So it was not how I expected my first day to go. Spent the rest of that day working on my application packet for UGA. And then, interviewed and got the offer a little bit after that. So was not at University of Florida as long as I had intended, but thankfully so, because it meant I got to come to UGA sooner.
Can you talk a little bit about what your extension appointment is and explain what an extension appointment is?
Absolutely. So as I said, I am an extension specialist. So where a lot of faculty are involved in teaching, particularly teaching undergraduates, I don't have that responsibility. My teaching responsibility is more workforce training. So I tend to focus on food safety, as I've said, but also primarily produce safety. So a lot of small farm, or I guess farm food safety in general. And so I do a lot of training with produce growers, with food manufacturers, with people just needing instruction on how to produce safe food. So my time is spent doing a lot of workshops, short courses, creating materials or resources to help people with instruction. So if a grower has a workforce that they need trained, I might help create some of those materials so that then they can go and use that on their farm or with their workers so that they receive that instruction. So that's what makes me a little different from a lot of our teaching and research faculty. I still involved in teaching, but it's just a very different approach with really that workforce focus.
Cool. What does your research focus on?
So I am a food microbiologist. Fresh produce safety is my primary interest. So I look at everything from on-farm production practices of fresh produce. And when I say fresh produce, fruits, nuts, vegetables, that sort of thing. I also look at post-harvest handling and also distribution and food safety issues related to that. So for instance, we have some field trials going on right now that are looking at how to safely use soil amendments, different fertilizer types, particularly animal-based fertilizer types. So how we can safely use these on fresh produce without introducing any foodborne hazards. So we have several projects looking at that sort of thing. We have projects looking at just best practices for cleaning and sanitation of equipment, cleaning and sanitation of facilities, so produce packing houses, food manufacturing facilities, things like that. We've also done some survey work, just trying to determine where hazards might be introduced throughout the distribution chain. So food leaves the farm. It usually has several steps before it reaches your shelf. So it might make a stop at a food processing center. It might make a stop at a distribution center. It'll make a stop at a store or at a restaurant, and then it eventually gets to you. And so we've spent time trying to determine where there might be weaknesses and where food safety hazards might actually be introduced throughout that entire process. So kind of look at produce from the field to really when it gets to you.
And what goals do you have for the future of your research? And how do you think our department will help you reach those goals?
So we have a fantastic department. And I can't think of a place I'd rather be in order to reach any goals that I might have. That's one thing I love about working here is a lot of my really good friends are also faculty and staff and students in the department. So as far as being set up for a future of success, I feel like I'm in the right place. I feel like my goals are more extension focused actually than research focused. I feel like a lot of my research really supports my extension efforts more so than the other way. So I enjoy research. I kind of plan on just continuing focusing on the current things I have going on and looking at some of those mitigations to ensure food safety in the fresh produce supply. But really, I think my primary goal is just becoming well established as a food safety resource in the state of Georgia, and continuing to be a reliable resource for our produce growers. Particularly, I've had more of an interest lately with some of our small farms, our beginning farms. I really like working with that group just because there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of that, new growers don't necessarily know everything they don't know, and they're just eager to learn. And I love working with people who are just excited and passionate and trying to make a living out of their backyard or trying to, make a living on a few acres. So I think my goal is really just to kind of continue and keep establishing myself as what I hope is a reliable resource for our produce farms throughout the state, and then our food manufacturers as well.